guys, welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, my name's Kate. I'm a health coach and I post videos on a high-fat, nutrient-dense way of eating. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up, feel free to share, and make sure to subscribe. And make sure to follow me on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook, where I share new posts every single day. A couple days ago, the World Health Organization came out with nutrition advice for adults during the outbreak. Proper nutrition and hydration are vital. People who eat a well-balanced diet tend to be healthier, with stronger immune systems and lower risk of chronic illness and infectious diseases. So you should eat a variety of fresh and unprocessed food every day to get the vitamins, minerals, dietary fiber, protein, and antioxidants your body needs. Drink enough water, avoid sugar, fat, and salt to significantly lower your risk of overweight, obesity, heart disease, stroke, diabetes, and certain types of cancer. First off, your risk of overweight? Do they mean of being overweight? Okay, so first off, was I surprised by these recommendations? No, not at all. This is the same dietary advice that the World Health Organization has been pushing for decades. Was I disappointed? Yes. While this guide doesn't outright say that eating this way will reduce your chance of getting it does say that it will boost your immune function, and I think that a lot of the recommendations that they made in this guide do not support a healthy immune system and actually increase your disease risk. And that's what we're going to talk about today. Now, I do not think that everything is completely wrong with this guide. They do advocate for eating mainly whole foods, limiting processed foods, and limiting sugar, all things which I think are good. But the recommendations for saturated fat being limited are not so good. Eat moderate amounts of fat and oil. Consume unsaturated fats, example found in fish, avocado, nuts, olive oil, soy, canola, sunflower, and corn oils, rather than saturated fats, found in fatty meat, butter, palm and coconut oils, cream, cheese, ghee, and lard. These recommendations are wrong for two reasons. The first of which being we do not need to limit saturated fat. The claim that saturated fat causes heart disease or any other disease is not true, and there is no solid evidence to back it up. In February of this year, a group of leading nutrition scientists held a workshop called Saturated Fats, a Food or Nutrient Approach, where they worked to dig through the evidence against saturated fat. This group included 3 former members of the Dietary Guidelines Advisory Committee, and after the workshop, they concluded that recent meta-analysis of both adequately controlled randomized trials of saturated fatty acid reduction and observational studies have found no significant evidence for effects of dietary saturated fatty acid intake on cardiovascular disease or total mortality. Moreover, recent evidence indicates that saturated fatty acid intake may be inversely related to risk of having a stroke. They wrote a letter to the U.S. Human Health Services urging them to take this evidence into consideration when they rewrite the U.S. Dietary Guidelines later this year. The evidence that the World Health Organization is basing this recommendation to limit saturated fat on comes from epidemiology studies. These are studies that look at large groups of people and try to draw connections between people's habits and their health outcomes. The problem is that this type of science cannot draw conclusions because there are so many variables. The way they gather data is from food frequency questionnaires that rely on self-reporting. The problem with food frequency questionnaires is that people can't remember what they ate every day, let alone calculate averages. How would you answer the question of how many servings of beef burgers you averaged over the past year? Not so easy to answer, is it? From this data, researchers form links. In this case, there is a connection between higher amounts of red meat in the diet with heart disease. But again, there are so many other factors at play. What is being eaten with these red meats? Probably a bun, a side of fries fried in vegetable oil, maybe a Coke. But the red meat is to blame? Now, these type of studies do have value. They form the initial link, and then they can be investigated further through more rigorous studies, through randomized control trials. But it's the further studies that will prove causation. And this cannot be proven through epidemiology studies. Now, on its own, the recommendation to limit saturated fat, yes, it has no grounds and it's bad enough. But what is even worse is what they recommend replacing the saturated fat with. Consume unsaturated fats found in fish, avocado, nuts, olive oil, soy, canola, sunflower, and corn oils. It is important to note that there are two types of unsaturated fats. There's monounsaturated and then there's polyunsaturated. Fats are molecules that are made up of carbon and hydrogen. The number of missing hydrogens determines the type of the fat. Saturated fat has all carbons bonded with hydrogens, whereas unsaturated fat is missing some hydrogens. Monounsaturated fats only have 2 missing, whereas polyunsaturated fats have more than 4. When these hydrogens are missing, this makes the fat more easily susceptible to oxidation, which damages the fat. And as you've probably realized, monounsaturated fat is more stable than polyunsaturated fat, which has more of these hydrogens missing. The more hydrogens you're missing, the higher risk of oxidation. Now, there is nothing wrong with unsaturated fats in and of themselves. Getting these types of fats through whole foods does have a lot of benefits. The problem is when refined versions of these fats are exposed to heat. They will oxidize, causing oxidative stress when we consume them, and these lead to all the diseases that the World Health Organization says this diet will prevent. The refined versions of these fats that I am mainly talking about are soybean oil, corn oil, canola oil, sunflower oil, all of which were just recommended. The World Health Organization also recommends avoiding trans fats, which I 100% agree with. Avoid industrially processed trans fats. These are often found in processed food, fast food, snack food, fried food, frozen pizza, pies, cookies, margarines, and spreads. I don't think there is anyone out there who thinks industrial trans fats are healthy, but here's the irony in all this. When vegetable oils oxidize, trans fats are created. I'll put 2 studies up on the screen that analyzed vegetable oils, and these studies found that 0.4 to 4.2% of the total fat content in these oils was trans fat. And this is a well-known fact. If you just Google trans fat in canola oil, it tells you right away. It is also important to note that if there's less than 1 gram of trans fat per serve, it does not have to be listed on the nutrition label. This is another issue I have with the fat recommendations, is limiting fat overall. The big push to reduce fat started in the 1970s, and since then we have listened. Americans are eating less red meat than ever before, and more lean meat, such as chicken. Despite this fact, obesity, heart disease, and diabetes have only increased. Fat is essential, and when we're talking about nutrition, essential means that our body cannot make it and that we have to get it through diet. When we talk about non-essential nutrients, these are nutrients that can be made within the body. Now, the World Health Organization recommends that every day you eat whole grains, unprocessed maize, millet, oats, wheat, brown rice, or starchy tubers. All of these foods are made up almost entirely of carbohydrates, and carbohydrates is a non-essential nutrient. When we eat carbohydrates, they are turned into glucose in the blood, and our bodies can actually make sufficient amounts of glucose as we require it. Because we can make it internally, we do not need to get it from diet. Now, this isn't a complete hit piece on carbohydrates. They do have their place for some people, especially athletes, but most people are not athletes and they are consuming way more carbohydrates than they need, and they're basing that off of recommendations like this. What I don't understand is why these dietary guidelines are based around a nutrient that is non-essential, and they tell you to limit one that is essential. And finally, I want to talk about sodium. When cooking and preparing food, limit the amount of salt and high sodium condiments, example, soy sauce and fish sauce. Limit your daily salt intake to less than 5 grams, which is approximately 1 teaspoon. Again, the limiting of sodium is not backed by evidence. Sodium is an essential electrolyte. It helps to maintain the balance of water in and around your cells, and it is also important for proper muscle and nerve function. The idea to lower salt consumption comes from the salt blood pressure hypothesis, which states that lowering sodium intake will lower your blood pressure. However, once again, there is no solid evidence backing this claim. Clinical studies have shown 80% of people with normal blood pressure do not see any increase in their blood pressure when they consume more salt. Even the majority of people who have prehypertension and hypertension do not see any impact to their blood pressure when they consume more salt. And for those who do see a slight increase, when they reduce their sugar consumption, they are no longer affected. Under-consuming sodium can actually be really dangerous. Low-salt diets have been shown to have numerous negative health outcomes on the body, including accelerated hardening of the arteries, compromised kidney function, increased insulin resistance, increased sugar cravings, increased appetite, and accumulation of visceral fat. Most people require a minimum of 3 grams of sodium every day. This is 3 times the upper limit that the World Health Organization recommends. And this is the minimum required. More is required if you eat a low-carb diet, if you consume a lot of caffeine, and if you exercise a lot. Anyways, guys, that is all I have for you today. In summary, yes, some of these recommendations are pretty good. Limiting processed food, limiting sugar, eating more whole foods, but a lot of them, let me know in the comment section down below what you think of these recommendations. If you want to know more about the dangers of vegetable oil, you can click this video here. If you want to catch up on my most recent upload, you can click here. And if you're interested in starting a keto or carnivore diet, you can check out my coaching programs here. Thanks again, guys. I'll see you next time. Bye.